On the North Circular Road, there's a building with 16 families living in apartments. There's lots of young children living there, looking forward to Santa coming. But before Christmas, they've been issued, all of them, with notices to quit. The landlord is not a small, accidental landlord. He's a businessman, and he has multiple properties. Yesterday, he told the tenants that they were great tenants, but he said the market dictates the rent. The grounds of eviction is the supposed need for substantial refurbishment. Of course, in reality, the tenants know it, the landlord knows it, and I would presume that everybody here knows it and has seen it again and again, that it's yet another renoviction. Something that deserves a word for itself now because it's so widespread, with the need for refurbishment used as a pretext to kick out tenants and hike up rents. If these tenants are evicted, they will mostly be evicted into homelessness. The Dublin Renters Union and Solidarity have been assisting them in preparing to oppose any evictions. But the anti-evictions bill, which we will debate tonight and vote on tomorrow, would stop evictions like this taking place. Every TD here will have a choice to take the side of landlords like that or take the side of the tenants. The vast majority of homelessness is being caused by evictions from the private rented sector. And that's just the sharpest end of the conditions that face tenants. Since the government took office, rents in cities have risen by over 30%. We know average rent nationally is over €1,300 a month. And we know when combined with low pay, when combined with precarity, 1 in 7 tenants now face consistent poverty. The picture, unfortunately, was very similar 2 years ago in January 2017 when we moved our previous anti-evictions bill. That bill was defeated by the casting vote of the Ceann Comhairle. That bill would have been passed if it weren't for the votes of the many landlords in this stall who voted against the bill. If it had been implemented then, 2,000 families who faced eviction in 2017 on the grounds of sale of property would have been protected. Your government voted against that bill, Taoiseach. 2 years on, with landlords continuing to use grounds of sale and renovation to evict tenants, will the government vote against an anti-evictions bill again? Will Fianna Fáil sit on the fence and abstain again? At the very least, Taoiseach, do you agree that the 1 in 4 TDs here who are landlords should recuse themselves from voting on this bill because of a clear conflict of interest? That conflict of interest goes much deeper, of course, than their personal status as landlords. It's related to the commitment of the establishment parties to the capitalist system and the free market in housing, which allows landlords to profit massively from a crisis facing tenants and others. It means that tenants like those on North Circular Road and all of those affected by the housing crisis have no choice but to organise for a ban on evictions, for proper rent controls and for the building of public and genuinely affordable housing.
Deputy, I've no doubt that all members of this House are able to make a distinction between their personal interests and the public interest. And that applies as much to people who are members of trade unions who might vote on employment legislation, employers who might vote on employment legislation, taxpayers, all of us here taxpayers voting on tax legislation. So I think people in this House are able to make that distinction between what is a personal interest and what is a public interest, and we all act in the public interest. I'm not familiar with the particular building that you speak of, but I do acknowledge that we need to act once again to strengthen tenants' rights. Hundreds of thousands of people in Ireland rent the properties in which they live, and we've already strengthened their rights in recent years, but we need to do that and take further actions, particularly to deal with landlords who abuse the renovation provisions in order to empty properties and jack up rents. So the rent bill, providing additional rights to renters and tenants, was approved by Cabinet yesterday. It has 4 major provisions. One, a rent register, so that people can see what rents are being charged in the area in which they live. Secondly, extending the notice to quit period, so that people who are asked to leave the home that they're renting or the house they're renting get much more time to find a new place to rent. a legal definition of substantial renovation to end renovictions and bogus renovations such as the ones you describe. And fourthly, additional powers to the RTB to enforce existing laws and these new laws. This is legislation government is bringing forward, and I sincerely hope that your party will vote for it, and I'd welcome an indication from you as to whether you will.
Thanks. Well, I asked for an indication from you for a bill that we're debating today, so perhaps we could get that first, and then when you publish your bill, we'll respond to it. So what our bill proposes to do is that it would ban evictions on the grounds of sale, which would mean that, as is the case in many other European countries, that sale would have to take place with tenants in situ. It would ban evictions on the grounds of renovations, and that in the case of a landlord saying they have to evict because of themselves or a family member moving in, that 6 months compensation of rent would have to be paid. Those are the kind of measures that are needed to guarantee the rights and situation of tenants. But on the fact about personal interest versus public interest, I mean, does the Taoiseach not see it as significant that I think 4% of people in society as a whole are landlords? In this House and within the Cabinet, 25% are landlords. Landlords are massively overrepresented here. And like I said, that isn't just a question of personal interest and motivation, although, of course, you'd be blind to think that those things don't affect people, but it's a question of ideology. This government is a landlord's government. It's the reason that it passed a landlord's budget, and it's the reason that it just pays lip service to the idea of tenants, and it's the reason that I suspect, regardless that you say you haven't seen the bill yet, that you will oppose this, and you'll allow families like those on North Circular Road to continue to be faced into homelessness again, and you'll turn the blind eye to it while profits of landlords shoot up through the roof.
Taoiseach.
Deputy, we think that your bill is too extreme. We think it's designed more for publicity than for policy, as is so often. I didn't say that. As is so often the case when it comes to things brought forward by PPP and for solidarity. It is too extreme. There are some landlords who are abusive and who are bad, but most landlords are just people renting out a property that they own, providing somewhere for people to live. And we shouldn't demonise landlords, because we do need people to rent. We do need people to rent out. We do need people to rent out their properties. And one of the reasons why we're facing some of the problems that we're facing is a lack of supply. People not willing to enter the rental market anymore to rent out properties, or people selling up because they don't want to be landlords anymore. And we have to bear that in mind. We have to balance the rights of tenants with the rights of landlords. And legislation that says to somebody that you can't move back into the house that you own, legislation says that a property you bought 10 or 20 years ago to accommodate your kid if they got a place in college, legislation that says you can't live in a house that you own, that you can't accommodate your own family in a house that you own, that if you're forced to, and if you need the money for some other reason, perhaps to pay medical bills for a relative, that you can't sell your own property is too extreme.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
But what we will do is four things. We'll legislate for a rent register so people will know the rents that are being paid by other people in their area. We'll extend the notice to quit so that people have more time to find a new home to live in or to rent. We will properly define in law what substantial renovation is and is not, and we will strengthen the powers of enforcement for the RTB. And I will guarantee you that the left-wing forces in this House will vote against those protections.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy